Hi, my name is Robert Chelle with Chelle Law, and my law firm assists surgeons with employment contract issues. Today I'm going to give some contract tips and some things to think about when you're negotiating an employment contract for a surgeon. Okay, so in this scenario, let's just take employment contracts. So either you're coming out of training, or perhaps you're thinking of switching jobs. And you're offered an employment contract. What are the areas you should be concerned about? And then maybe some areas that you have more leverage than others. So first thing you should think about are the bonuses. So in almost any contract for a surgeon, there'll be some kind of signing bonus. And then if you are moving to a new city, town, wherever, they should pay for your relocation as well. So we'll call that relocation assistance. So you'll have a signing bonus, and in addition, you'll have relocation assistance. Now, how much is the normal signing bonus? Well, it depends. Anywhere between 20 to 50,000 would be a normal signing bonus, and then as far as relocation assistance, usually somewhere between 10 to 15,000 would be considered a reasonable amount. If you are not getting that much for either one, that's something you need to negotiate to improve. Some employers will try to lump it all into one, so take that into account, just add them together. But that's the normal range for a surgeon. Obviously, there can be more. Some places, like if you're maybe entering with a rural hospital network, they might offer some student loan assistance as well. And there are some student loan packages that can reach 150,000. Now there will be a period of time that you have to stay with the employer in order to get all of that money or have it forgiven and not have to pay it back. But there are, beyond the signing bonus and the relocation assistance, some physicians also get student loan repayment as well. And that's mostly for people just coming out of training. You're not going to get that if you've been out for a while. All right, so next, you need to think about the compensation structure. So is it just the base salary? Is it RVU production if you're in a hospital network? Is it net collections if you're with maybe a private physician-owned practice? You need to determine what your fair market value is. And so there are a couple ways of doing that. One, talking to the people that you're in training with and seeing what their offers are, talking to your mentors and seeing what they're making out there. Trying to find the MGMA data. The Medical Group Management Association is kind of the industry standard for compensation amongst different specialties for physicians. It's difficult to get up-to-date MGMA data unless you have direct access to it and pay for it. So you could probably Google and find some, a year or two old data, but very unlikely you're going to find the most up-to-date data on your own. But that is helpful, even if it's a year or two old, to kind of see, all right, well, what's a normal range? You can also find beyond total compensation, average RVU production per year per specialty, and average net collections per specialty as well. So you need to find that out. Now, is one compensation, calculation better than another? Not really. If you're in a hospital network, it's likely going to be RVU production. If you're in private practice, it's likely going to be net collections if there is some kind of productivity model involved. One is not better than another. Now, if you're on net collections, it's going to be a percentage of what the net collections that you bring into the practice from your personally performed services is. That percentage can certainly change. If you're on pure net collections, it'll be somewhere between 35 to 45%. If you're on maybe a hybrid of like half base, guaranteed base, and then half productivity, it might be somewhere between 15 to 25% of your net collections. Just kind of depends. And then RVUs, very simple. You just multiply the amount of RVUs that you produce per year, per quarter, per month, then multiply that times a conversion factor. You can find that in the MGMA data as well. That is dependent upon specialty, so the different subspecialties of surgery will have a different comp factor number. So that's a way of negotiating, is trying to find what is fair market value and whether you're getting it or not with your new job. Next, if you have a claims-made policy, are they going to pay for tail insurance? So if you are joining a hospital network, it's likely they're self-insured or have some kind of policy where you will not have to pay tail. If you're going into private practice or a smaller physician-owned practice, it's very likely they're going to have some kind of claims-made coverage. And it's also very likely they're going to expect you to pay for your tail. So tail insurance just covers the gap in between when you leave an employer and then the last day somebody can sue you. And so as far as costs for tail, it could be normally around twice what your annual premium is. Surgical specialties can really, vary based upon what you're doing, but it could be anywhere from 12 all the way up to 30,000 a year. So if you just double that, that's kind of a good range of what you'd have to pay for tail. Tail is a one-time payment. You don't pay for it, per year. It's just a one-time payment. Then you're covered for what the length of the tail policy dictates. So getting the employer to pay for your tail certainly is important for most people that have a claims-made policy. It's probably, 75% of the physician-owned practices make the employee pay for it. If they're not willing to pay for your entire tail, one kind of strategy we've been successful with is telling them, all right, well, if let's say you have a three-year initial term, then you would say, all right, for every year that I'm here, you would then chip in, 1/3 of the cost for tail. And so if you finish out the first 3 years, then the employer would pay for your entire amount of your tail policy. You can also get out of having to pay for tail if your new employer pays your old tail. That's called nose coverage. Or if you stay with the same insurance company at your new job, they'll usually just roll over your policy into a new one. You wouldn't have to pay tail. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about as far as things to think about when you're negotiating is the non-compete. So this is pretty important, especially for surgeons. Now, there's really two components to a non-compete. You have things you can't do while the contract is going on. That's usually called either exclusivity or outside activities. And most of the contracts will state you have to get written approval if you want to work or practice medicine at all for anyone else during the term of your agreement. Now, a lot of surgeons will want to do moonlight locums, or maybe let's just say they are a plastics, but they're working for a children's hospital just doing hands. They may want to do and keep up their skills doing, adults or other types of general plastics. And so they want to make certain that their employment contract will allow them to do that. I mean, you wouldn't want to be prohibited from keeping up your skills somewhere else. But most employers are pretty strong with requiring approval. So you want to get that approval in advance and just say, all right, if I do this, and obviously as long as it doesn't interfere with my job duties with you, am I allowed to do some of this outside stuff on my off time? And the employer should say yes in that scenario. Now, as far as the non-compete after the contract ends, you need to think about, all right, well, what is the specialty that's stopping me from doing? Obviously, if you're a general surgeon, it says you can't practice general surgery. That's what it's going to say. But once again, for other specialties that can do multiple things, you just want it to be specific to the thing that you're doing for that employer. And then it will be for a period of time, usually somewhere between 1 to 2 years. Try to get it to 1 year. And then lastly, the geographic restriction will vary pretty widely based upon where you are. So if you're in an urban environment, it'll probably be a little bit less. So somewhere between 5 to 10 miles would be considered a reasonable amount. I've seen contracts that try to knock a surgeon out of every contiguous county, which could be a huge geographic radius, or 10 miles from every facility that their employer owns, and they could own dozens of them in a city. You want to limit it to the places that you're practicing. So your clinic location, surgery center, hospitals where you're performing procedures. Try to limit it to as, the fewest as possible, and then try to really squeeze down that, mileage radius as well. For some people, a non-compete is the biggest deal. So if you have family in town, kids in school, whatever it is, there's just no way that you could move after, or if your employment ended. That could be the biggest negotiating point with an employer. Some people move into a city for a specific job, have no ties to the area, and do not care because they're going to move as soon as the contract ends. So you kind of have to determine what's the priority level for you. So those are just 4 things to think about. There are obviously dozens of other things that could go into a contract. I don't have time to go over every one of them today, but I'd say the 4 that I went over are usually kind of the 4 highlights that I hit with every physician when we're talking about their employment contract. If you have any questions about your employment contract, you can always call my law firm at the phone number listed below in the description, or you can reach us through our website, chellelaw.com, CHELLE law.com, and I appreciate you watching the video. Thank you.